James Degale is fighting Dyer Davis tomorrow night. That's Saturday night here in the UK. Dyer Davis is an American fighter. To be honest with you, I've never really seen Dyer Davis fight. The only time I saw him in the ring was some highlights of his fight with Saki Obika where he was getting beaten up. That's pretty much all I've seen of him. So I can't really make a prediction on the fight, to be honest with you, because I just don't really know enough about Dyer Davis. I ain't taking the time to try and look up fights of his on YouTube or anything like that. This video was more about James Degale and his career and his character, really, because he's an interesting character. You know, when James Degale won his gold medal, there was obviously a lot of fanfare around him here in the UK. And that fanfare built up to a fever pitch up until he fought George Groves. And a lot of people didn't like James Degale, but a lot of people did like him. A lot of people was on the James Degale bandwagon. I was not one of those people. I was always a little bit of a skeptic of James Degale. And, you know, typical of UK sports fans. But they really overhyped James Degale, and Degale's one of those guys who let the hype go to his head. He really let it all go to his head, and he ended up thinking he was better than he really was. Now, I know there's a lot of people that feel that James Degale did actually beat George Groves when they fought, and that's fair enough. It was a close fight. It could have gone either way. If you had it for Degale, that's fine. But the problem is that James Degale said he was going to stop George Groves within 4 rounds. That's what he said. Yeah, he said, I think maximum, he said maybe like 6-7 rounds or something like that. He said if George Groves comes to fight, it could be over in 2 rounds. I remember him saying all this stuff. And a lot of his fans, most of his fans believed it. They really believed that he was just going to wipe the floor with George Groves and the fight wasn't even competitive. So that just shows you how caught up in the hype a lot of his fans were, and how caught up in the hype James Degale himself was. He was believing his own hype. Now, Degale does have talent. He is a slick guy. He does have a natural, he has a natural aptitude for that slick boxing style. He's very comfortable in the ring. He's very comfortable with fighters throwing punches at him. You know, in some instances, people have criticized him for being too comfortable with punches coming at him. But he is very comfortable under pressure in the ring when people are throwing shots at him. He's very relaxed, which is very important in boxing, especially when it comes to stamina. From what I've heard about James Degale in the gym, this guy can spar all day long. I mean, ridiculous amounts of rounds this guy can spar because he's so relaxed. You know, that's why trainers always tell fighters in the ring, relax, relax, relax. And it's not just about relaxing physically, but you have to a certain extent, relax mentally as well. You don't want to be so relaxed that you're not paying attention, but you need to feel comfortable mentally, comfortable and happy, and you need to be relaxed and physically not tense so you don't tire out. So Degale definitely has that, but my criticisms of Degale really have always been, his punch technique. He's been accused of slapping, and I think he still does slap a bit. I'm not saying that he don't have any type of power, but I do think that his punch technique is a bit off and he don't always punch correctly with the knuckle part of the glove and turn his punches over. And I know he's been trying to work on that in recent fights, but it is still a little bit of an issue. Degale's not a massive puncher. He's certainly not feather-fisted, but he's not a massive puncher. He's got pretty good hand speed, but nothing spectacular. But then again, compared to a lot of the fighters in the division, he's one of the quicker guys out there. He's certainly not as quick as a guy like Andre Dirrell, who's probably the fastest guy at super middleweight right now. Dirrell's hands are tremendously quick. Degale ain't that quick, all right? I'm not even sure if he's quite as quick as Andre Ward. Andre Ward is quick, but he's not crazy quick. He's not like Roy Jones. He's probably not even as quick hand speed wise as James Toney was in his prime, but Ward is pretty quick, certainly quicker than Carl Froch and Mikhail Kessler and people like that. Degale is, again, his hand speed is pretty good, but it's nothing amazing. It's nothing exceptional. He's certainly not anything like Joe Calzaghe. Calzaghe was a lot quicker hand speed wise than Degale and foot speed wise. So I don't know, Degale, he certainly has talent. He's got that slickness. He can switch hit. When he puts his punches together, the combinations, it's pretty impressive. It is pretty impressive. He does have a lot of natural skill and, good balance, the way he's able to switch from left to right, although he does it a bit much in a lot of his fights. Again, his power is decent, but he don't have the kind of power that can intimidate opponents. That's one thing James Degale don't have. He's got the kind of power that can keep you honest, but nothing that can intimidate you. So Degale's talented, but I don't know. I just think unless you're going to turn him into a complete spoiler and a master tactician like a Bernard Hopkins, or purely defensive fighter like a Floyd Mayweather, then I mean, and even Mayweather is very athletically gifted. I'm not even sure if Degale could succeed with Mayweather's type of style, because Mayweather still does rely somewhat on his hand speed. And I don't know, I just, pound for pound, Degale's not as quick as Mayweather. So I think if he had a bit more of a rough tactical style like Bernard Hopkins, I think he would do better. And I'm not saying he should abandon all the stuff he does now, the slick stuff, not at all. He should, keep that in his arsenal. But I'm not sure the way he fights is going to be effective against everyone in the division. Boxing is all about maximizing your potential. Taking whatever you do well and exaggerating it almost, and trying to hide or minimize the things you don't do so well. You understand what I'm saying? So that's one thing Bernard Hopkins does tremendously. Hopkins knows he's not a big puncher. He knows that he's not the quickest guy in the world. And he's obviously not the youngest guy in the world. He's not the biggest light heavyweight in the world. He's not the strongest light heavyweight in the world. So he uses, his rough tactics, his offbeat rhythm, his timing. He only throws when he needs to throw in most fights. He only throws when it's the right time to throw. He'll go through rounds with, 10 punches maximum sometimes that he'll land. So he's not worried about keeping the volume up or impressing the crowd or anything like that. But at this stage, Degale kind of is. He is worried about impressing the crowd. He is worried about doing all these kind of things. So I don't know, man. To me, it's like Degale's good, but there's something missing. That's what I've always felt about him. There's just something missing. Now, in terms of Degale's character, he's a very interesting character. He's definitely not everyone's cup of tea. I can definitely see how he rubs people up the wrong way. He's got a very, let's just be real. He's got a very arrogant, he comes across as very arrogant, basically. He comes across as very arrogant, and he never comes across as funny or likable. He just comes across as just straight arrogant. It's like David Haye, for example, does piss people off. He does come across as arrogant, but he's funny with it. At least to me and to a lot of people, David Haye is funny. There's something humorous about the way he says, when he does his trash talk and stuff like that. He goes so over the top that to me and a lot of people is funny. You understand? David Haye does have like this cheeky, funny, character to him, but James Degale just comes across as arrogant and miserable at the same time. And that's just something that is not very endearing to a lot of boxing fans in the general public. He has this arrogant, miserable personality. And lately, ever since he signed with Mick Hennessy, he's been unhappy with Mick Hennessy. It's blatantly obvious. It's coming out in the press conferences. It's coming out in all James Degale's interviews. There's been times when him and Mick Hennessy have been on camera at the same time, and you can see there's clearly tension there. James Degale is not making it a secret that he's not happy with Mick Hennessy. He feels that he should have had a world title fight by now. When he signed with Hennessy, it was, I'm not sure if he won the European title before he left Frank Warren or after he joined Hennessy. I can't remember. But anyway, around the time when he joined Hennessy, he was European champion, and he expected to go on to become the world champion shortly after that. But it hasn't happened. Now, apparently James Degale was only 13 or 14 fights in when he joined Mick Hennessy. And according to what Mick Hennessy's saying now, he don't feel like Degale was ready back then for a world title fight. And I actually agree with that. I do agree with that. Obviously, James DeGale seems to disagree because he's extremely frustrated with the way Mick Hennessy's handling his career. He's extremely frustrated. But then again, DeGale seems to be saying that he was promised a title fight, or it had been, he'd been led to believe that he would get a title fight, a title shot, pretty soon after signing with Hennessy. So it seems like DeGale he feels like he's been duped a little bit. Feels like he's been misled somewhat. That's the impression I get. But at the same time, I do think that Mick Hennessy might have a point about DeGale not being ready when he first signed with him. I wouldn't have, if I was his manager, I wouldn't have put him in a world title fight straight away. I mean, I remember him fighting for the European title against that Eastern European guy, and he had trouble in that fight. So I wouldn't have put him straight, because you got to look at the champions in the super middleweight division. These guys are seasoned, tough pros who've been fighting at the top level for a long time. Saki Obika is no joke. Yeah, I know he's wild and crude and all that kind of stuff, but this guy's tremendously strong. He's very experienced. He's been around for a long time. Most people would say he's the weakest champion, but he's no joke. I'm telling you right now, he is no joke. Carl Froch, we know, very tough guy, very experienced guy, for all the best in the world, other than Saki Obika. And obviously Andre Ward is the kingpin right now at 168. So there's no easy title fights right now for James DeGale, other than maybe Stieglitz. Stieglitz could be there. Now, that is something that they could maybe go for. But to be honest with you, even Stieglitz in his last fight against Arthur Abraham, even he looked pretty good. And let me correct myself. I think I said that Beaker was the weakest of the champions. No, it's probably Stieglitz that's the weakest of the champions. But either way, not sure what's going on with the Stieglitz situation, whether James DeGale could get in there. I don't know. But certainly the other three champions are no pushovers at all. And after 13 fights, was James DeGale really ready for any of those guys? I don't think so. So whether or not it's a case of Hennessy not being able to secure those fights because of his, lack of competency or whatever, or whether it's to do with the fact that he maybe didn't feel James DeGale was ready. I don't know what the case may be, but to be honest with you, I think that James DeGale needs to be a little bit more patient. He needs to be a little bit more patient. I know he's frustrated. He wants to get to the top as quickly as possible. He sees people like George Groves getting title fights and stuff like that, and he's very frustrated. But he also has to remember that George Groves got a title shot almost by default. This fight, George Groves against Carl Froch, wouldn't even be happening if it wasn't for the fact that, 3 or 4 of the guys in the rankings, is it the IBF title that Groves is fighting Froch for? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the IBF. But 3 or 4 of the guys of the top, 5 guys in the IBF rankings were either injured or involved in other fights. So none of them could be the mandatory for Carl Froch. So they had to go all the way down the line and find George Groves to be the mandatory challenger. So Groves got that title shot by default. He didn't really get it because he worked his way up the rankings or anything like that. Groves himself has been fighting pretty mediocre opposition. He hasn't been fighting any opposition that's much better than DeGale's been fighting. So I'm not sure whether DeGale's frustration is, or his belief that he's got the right to be frustrated is really all that valid, to be honest with you. Because I don't think Groves is really having an amazing opportunity, because of anything Eddie Hearn has done. It's just because of the way the rankings in the IBF worked out. So I don't know, man. I think DeGale should be a bit more patient, take it in his stride, learn his craft. And it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Especially for a guy with DeGale's kind of style. He should have that kind of mentality. It's a marathon, it ain't a sprint, man. Take your time, learn your craft. I would really like to see DeGale go to America. I've been saying that for a long time. If he could go to America, no disrespect to his trainer, Jim McDonnell, but I'd love to see him go to America and be up there in the Mayweather camp. I think they could really do something with James DeGale and really get the best out of him over there in the Mayweather camp. He'd be getting the very best sparring. He'd learn so much. He'd learn the mentality. that they have over there, you know, in the Mayweather camp as well. I'm not talking about, you know, the arrogance, although he might even get more arrogant than he already is in the Mayweather camp. I'm talking about the mentality in terms of how they go about a fight, how they go about a camp, the professionalism, you know, having the mindset of a winner, not underestimating your opponents. Because, you know, say what you want about Floyd, and I've certainly criticized him plenty in the past, but Floyd Mayweather is very professional. He don't underestimate no one, and he takes all his opponents very seriously. You understand what I'm saying? And he really learns his craft as well as he can learn it and makes the most out of his ability, you know, as he sees fit in his safety first style. So I think that Degale would do much better over in America in terms of what he'd learn, you know, and I really think at this stage he should just put his apprentice hat on and just play his position a little bit. Maybe it's just not quite James Degale's time. I know he's a hungry young guy, but maybe it's just not his time yet. Yeah, he's still young enough. His time will come. You know, I just think at this stage, just learn your craft, be patient, and your time will definitely come. You know, and I think on Channel 5, as much as he's upset about fighting in shopping centers and all this kind of stuff, and I was definitely iffy about him signing with Mick Hennessy, especially since shortly after he signed with Hennessy, Hennessy's deal with Channel 5 seemed to be going south. Yeah. So I was very iffy about that whole situation. I thought that Degale would have been better off signing with Eddie Hearn. And he still might have been better off signing with Eddie Hearn, you know. It would have been easier to get a rematch with Groves for one. But, you know, it is what it is. You can't cry over spilt milk. And in the situation he's in, I think he should just try and be a little bit patient. Yeah, Mick Hennessy at the end of the day knows that Degale has potential. He knows what Degale is capable of doing. And he knows that he can, if he plays his cards right, make some, you know, good money out of Degale. You know, he don't want to just keep Degale fighting, you know, like B-class and C-class fighters for the rest of his career. Mick Hennessy, you know, fighting in shopping centers in Blue Water. Mick Hennessy ain't going to make no big money doing that. He knows the potential that Degale has financially. So eventually he is going to want to take advantage of that himself. So, I mean, obviously I'm not privy to what goes on behind the scenes, but from the outside looking in, that's how I see it. So, yeah, it's been a pretty long video. If you know any more about Dyer Davis than I do, drop your predictions below, because I don't really know about the guy. But in terms of James Degale as a character, yeah, you know, let me know how you feel. Let me know how you feel his career has been handled. If you feel his frustration and feel his pain or you don't, how you feel about him as a character. You know, personally, I never really get caught up too much in fighters' characters other than from a point of entertainment, unless they come out and do something really, you know, terrible and negative that's just such a bad influence on the people who follow them, because these boxers do get idolized. Unfortunately, you should never really idolize another human being. You know, not unless you're, I mean, I don't think anyone should do it, but the only people I really, you know, give a pass to is like teenage girls, you know. They idolize certain pop stars like Justin Bieber and stuff like that. But, you know, really and truly grown men shouldn't be idolizing anyone. But, you know, people do idolize these fighters, young men. They do idolize these people. And sometimes when fighters are in a position to influence others, or not just fighters, but celebrities in general, they can really lead people astray with some of their foolishness. You know, I don't really want to go into names and stuff like that right now, but I'm sure you can think of young boxers in the sport right now who are doing all kind of dumb shit, basically, which I don't like. But outside of that, you know, when it's just trash talk, like, you know, David Haye and James Toney and people like that, all that kind of trash talk, it's just entertainment to me. But when it comes to Degale, I don't have a problem with the way he conducts himself, but if he hopes to make more money, he's either going to have to be more obnoxious than he already is. He's either going to have to go to he's either have to going to go the Tyson Fury route, where he just goes all out and just talks incredible bullshit, or he's going to have to try go the Anthony Joshua route, where he's an amazing nice guy. You know, he's going to have to pick one of the two, because right now he's just down the middle, where he's not controversial enough for people to care about anything he says. And he's not likable enough. He's not nice enough for people to like him. So he's just stuck in no man's land right now where no one really likes him. And I mean, some people hate him, but no one really cares enough about him to really want to see him fight. You know, if he created some controversy and was talking a bit more than he is talking now, he might find it easier to get fights if he pissed people off enough, you know? If he does the Tyson Fury thing and makes himself obnoxious enough, appears on YouTube all the time and all that kind of stuff, he might find it easier to get some of these big fights on. Who knows, man? But anyway, long ass video. Drop your comments below. This is Hatman. I'm out.